Vivian Blackstone Sterling snatched my ID from my hand like it was garbage and slammed it down the storm drain before I even blinked. I just stood there, sweaty and covered in sawdust, watching my whole life slip into that dark hole. And that's when I realized she didn't just humiliate me, she just lit the fuse to blow up her entire family's empire. Alright, so here's the thing. It is a thing about me. I'm not your typical tough guy hero. I'm Edgar Thornfield, but everyone around here just calls me Ed. I used to run a pretty serious investment firm, Meridian Capital Holdings. Big deals, boardrooms, all that jazz. I was in the thick of it for decades, making numbers dance and keeping the company afloat through thick and thin. But that life? It ended the day Margaret died. Margaret was my wife, smart as a whip, kind, and stubborn as hell when she wanted something. We had this big old house on Maple Street, the kind of place you picture in those cheesy family movies. She loved that house, but more than that, she loved the garden she'd planted in the backyard. Those sunflowers were her pride and joy. She'd read somewhere that they might help with the nausea from her chemo treatments. I don't know if they actually did anything, but to her, they were more than just flowers. They were a little piece of hope, a bright spot in the darkest time of her life. The thing about HOAs, you think they're just these harmless neighborhood watchdogs, right? Keeping things tidy, making sure no one parks a rusty old truck in their driveway. But it's more than that. For Margaret, it was hell. The HOA president back then, Patricia Fleming, she was a cold one. Didn't care about Margaret's sickness or the meaning behind those sunflowers. Every week, another violation notice. Unapproved plantings. Failure to maintain landscaping standards. Like they were trying to squeeze out every bit of joy from her last months. Watching Margaret get worn down by that was worse than the cancer itself. It wasn't just about flowers, it was about dignity, and they crushed it. After Margaret passed, I sold the company, left most of my old life behind. I didn't want to fight anymore. I moved here to this quiet corner of suburbia, thinking I could fade into the background, fix roofs, paint fences, keep my hands busy and my mind off the emptiness. It's funny, after all those years in suits and ties, getting my hands dirty with sawdust was oddly comforting. So yeah, that's me, just an old man trying to find peace. But sometimes, peace doesn't come easy. Especially when someone like Vivian Blackstone Sterling decides you're the enemy. So picture this. I'm up on Rosa Martinez's roof, sweat pouring down my face, hands rough from hauling shingles and wrestling with that damn flashing that had pulled away. I'd barely started patching up the leak in her bedroom when I heard those heels clicking hard on the concrete below, the kind of sound that makes you know trouble's coming before you even see who it is. I climbed down slowly, trying to wipe off the sawdust on my shirt when she showed up. Vivian Blackstone Sterling, the HOA president, striding up like she owned every inch of this neighborhood, which, to be fair, she kinda does. She was dressed to the nines, hair pulled back so tight it looked like she was ready to do battle in a boardroom, not check a leaky roof. She didn't even try to hide the disdain in her voice. "Excuse me," she said, eyes narrowing. "What exactly do you think you're doing up there?" I straightened up and looked her dead in the eye. Just helping Rosa fix a leak, nothing that violates any codes. I wasn't about to cause trouble, not today. But Vivian wasn't interested in my words. She was there to make a point. "Do you have a license for roofing work? Bonded? Insured?" She fired off questions like bullets, trying to rattle me. I pulled out my wallet and handed over my driver's license, the same one I'd carried for years. Edgar Thornfield, plain as day, 3 blocks away from here. She stared at it like it was some alien artifact, memorizing every detail. Then she said something that stuck like a slap. "People like you destroy property values around here. You bring down the entire standard of this community." I could feel the weight of those words, but I kept quiet. I knew better than to argue. And then, without warning, she flicked my ID towards the storm drain like she was throwing out trash. It clattered against the grate and slipped through, disappearing into the darkness. For a second, I just stared at the grate, mouth dry. Rosa gasped behind me, and I could see neighbors peeking out from their windows, whispering. Vivian smiled that smug, satisfied smile like she'd just won some petty battle. "Now you'll need to get a replacement," she said sweetly, like that made it all okay. "Maybe next time you'll think twice before offering unlicensed services in a premium community." I didn't say a word. I just stood there, feeling something hard and cold settle in my chest. She thought she'd broken me with that one move, but what she didn't know was that she'd just poked a hornet's nest, and I wasn't planning on walking away. After that whole ID in the drain stunt, things didn't just simmer down. Nope, Vivian doubled down, and suddenly it felt like every day brought a new headache. She started targeting Rosa like she was the neighborhood's official punching bag. At first, it was little stuff, a notice about the mailbox being improperly placed, then fines for the garden hose being visible from the street. I mean, come on, who even notices that? But Rosa's already stretched thin, juggling 2 jobs and 2 kids, trying to keep things together after losing her husband. The last thing she needed was this kind of harassment. And Vivian? She was relentless. Measuring tape in one hand, clipboard in the other, stalking around the block like she was on a mission to crush anyone who dared to step out of line. I tried talking to her once, politely. Told her we could work something out, maybe even help with some of the community standards. She just scoffed and said, "People like you don't belong here." Like it was a fact, not an opinion. Then came the fines, not just for Rosa, but for every family that didn't fit her perfect mold. Families of color, single moms, elderly folks on fixed incomes. It was like she had a list and she was checking it twice, making sure nobody slipped through. The white families, barely a slap on the wrist. Everyone else, thousands of dollars in fines piled up for the smallest violations. I kept trying to keep my cool, reminding myself to stay within the law, to not give her an excuse. But it was like playing chess against someone who could rewrite the rules in the middle of the game. She'd call secret HOA meetings, change the bylaws overnight, threaten to tow cars, or even take people to court for nonsense. One afternoon, I came home to find Rosa in tears because Vivian had declared her trim paint the wrong shade and demanded it be repainted within 2 weeks or face a $5,000 fine. That's when it hit me. This wasn't about rules or property values. This was about power, control, and making an example out of anyone who dared to stand up. Still, despite the growing pile of violations and threats, Rosa and the other families kept quiet. Fear had them locked down. I could see it in their eyes when they looked at me, hoping someone, anyone, would be their voice. But HOA was an impenetrable fortress, and Vivian was its iron gate. Some nights I sat in the dark, thinking about Margaret and how she fought her own battle against these same kinds of petty tyrants. I felt that familiar sting of helplessness creeping in, whispering that maybe I should just let it go, walk away like I did before. But every time I saw Rosa's determined face or heard a neighbor mutter about another fine, that voice got drowned out by something stronger. I wasn't about to let Vivian win. So after weeks of watching Vivian crank up the heat on Rosa and everyone else, I figured it was time to stop just gritting my teeth and start doing something real. I reached out to Marcus Chen. You remember him? That sharp young lawyer I'd helped years ago when he was just a scrappy law student. I knew if anyone could help me cut through this HOA madness, it was him. Marcus didn't hesitate. He dove right in, pulling public records, violation notices, anything that could show a pattern. And sure enough, it wasn't just me or Rosa. Vivian had a whole spreadsheet of offenses against families of color, single moms, elderly neighbors, all with fines way higher than what she slapped on the wealthier white households. It was textbook discrimination, and damn if it didn't make my blood boil. We started filing complaints, talking to local authorities, trying to get the city involved. I called the HOA board, asking for meetings, trying to get some accountability, but most of them either ignored me or backed Vivian without a second thought. The influence she had ran deep, deeper than I expected. I even went to the police after the ID incident. I wanted a report on that humiliation, the destruction of property, whatever I could get. The operator told me the call was recorded because Rosa accidentally hit 911 when Vivian tossed my license down the drain. That recording was gold. It was proof that Vivian was out of line, harassing residents and abusing her power. Still, every time we thought we'd made progress, HOA lawyers would swoop in with threats or counterclaims. Vivian's legal team was like a pack of sharks, pushing back hard, filing injunctions, trying to freeze out anyone who dared to push back. Each small victory felt like wading through molasses, and the fines kept piling up. I organized meetings with neighbors, trying to get them to stand up together, but fear ran thick. They worried about retaliation, about losing their homes or their peace. I get it. I felt that fear myself creeping in, whispering that maybe the fight wasn't worth it. But every time I was ready to throw in the towel, Rosa would remind me why we couldn't. She'd say, "If we don't fight, who will?" And I'd see the same determination in the eyes of the Johnsons, the Patels, even the Williams family, all of them quietly carrying their own battles. It was exhausting, frustrating, and for a while it felt like we were shouting into the void. The system was rigged and Vivian was playing to win. I started doubting if justice was even possible here. But giving up? That wasn't an option. Not yet. Alright, here's where things got real, like jaw-dropping real. Just when I was starting to feel like this fight was a losing battle, Marcus calls me up with this voice that's all tight and excited, like he's just found the missing piece to a puzzle we didn't even know existed. He tells me about this moral conduct clause buried deep in the financing contract for the Lakewood Estates project, Vivian's family's pride and joy, their billion-dollar lakefront development. Turns out, if any partner gets caught doing something that harms the community's reputation or acts discriminatorily, the funding can be pulled instantly. Like, no questions asked. I sat back, coffee halfway to my mouth, staring at the phone, thinking, you've got to be kidding me. And then there was this call from a doctor, Elena Vasquez at some memory care facility. She says I'm listed as the emergency contact for Theodore Sterling, Vivian's dad. That's right, the big shot patriarch who built the family empire. Except here's the kicker. He's been living with advanced Alzheimer's for almost 2 years, and Vivian's been desperately trying to keep him in the best care money can buy. Care that costs more than most of us make in a year. The whole picture slammed into me at once. Vivian's fury, her cruelty. It wasn't just about power or control. It was fear. Fear of losing her father, her family, everything she'd ever known. That monstrous pressure she was under, juggling a crumbling empire, a sick parent, and the weight of maintaining an illusion of control. But here's the thing. Understanding her pain didn't mean I was going to let her keep bulldozing over the lives of people like Rosa and the rest of us. It just made her all the more dangerous. That same day, Rosa calls me, voice shaking, saying Vivian had come back to her house, measuring everything again, this time threatening to slap a $5,000 fine for a paint color that was just a shade too dark. It was deliberate. A message. But now, armed with this moral conduct clause and the proof of systematic harassment Marcus dug up, I wasn't just mad anymore. I was ready. The scales had tipped. Vivian thought she was the one holding all the cards. Turns out, I had the ace up my sleeve. After that phone call with Marcus, I knew we were sitting on something huge, the kind of thing that could turn this whole nightmare upside down. But having the truth on your side doesn't mean you win overnight. No, it meant it was time to get organized, be smart, and play the long game. I spent hours in my study digging through papers, violation notices, recorded calls, everything Marcus and I had collected. It was like putting together a giant puzzle, except the picture was ugly. Patterns of harassment, selective enforcement, blatant discrimination. Every fine Vivian had handed out, every threat she'd made, lined up like a thread, revealing her real intentions. I started reaching out to the neighbors, one by one. Rosa was a natural leader, even if she didn't realize it yet. She was fearless in a way most of us weren't. I told her we needed to bring everyone together, get the families who'd been bullied, shamed, fined, or worse into one room. Not just to vent, but to plan a real strategy. We needed signatures, enough to call for a vote of no confidence in Vivian as HOA president. It wasn't going to be easy. People were scared. Some thought fighting back meant risking everything, their homes, their savings, their peace of mind. But I reminded them what happened to Margaret, what Vivian's cruelty had done to her. I told them we couldn't let fear win this time. Meanwhile, Marcus was working behind the scenes, lining up all the legal firepower. He built a case that could withstand anything Vivian's lawyers threw at us, complete with financial records, witness statements, and that moral conduct clause that felt like a loaded gun aimed right at her. But I wasn't just relying on legal tricks. I knew we needed to change the narrative, make the community see that Vivian wasn't protecting them, she was tearing them apart. So, Rosa and I started organizing meetings, informal gatherings at first, just neighbors talking, sharing stories. Slowly, the silence began to break. It took days, weeks even, but we gathered momentum. Neighbors who'd been silent out of fear started coming forward, lending their voices and signatures. The small victories, canceled fines here, dropped violations there, started stacking up, feeding a growing sense of hope. Still, I kept telling myself this was just the beginning. Vivian wasn't going down without a fight, and neither was her family's empire. But for the first time since that damn ID went down the drain, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Real hope. Alright, so the plan was set, and it was go time. I wasn't just sitting back hoping Vivian would fold. No way. Marcus and I decided to hit her where it hurt, her precious reputation and the shaky financial foundation of that Lakewood Estates project. We set up a meeting, low-key at first. Vivian thought she was just dealing with some mid-level rep from Meridian Capital, nothing serious. Boy, was she wrong. I watched from a coffee shop across the street as she walked into that conference room, all confidence and sharp suits. But I could see it in her eyes, even before the meeting started, that flicker of doubt creeping in. Marcus laid out everything carefully, talking about community relations concerns and the potential fallout from the discrimination evidence. Didn't mention me once, let Vivian stew in her own panic. After about 45 minutes, she stumbled out, face pale, hands gripping her briefcase like it was a lifeline. I caught the text from Marcus. She was rattled, asking questions about who tipped off corporate headquarters, who'd been talking to lawyers and scrambling to cover her tracks. That's when I told Marcus to turn up the heat. We ran a background check on me. Make it sloppy, make it obvious. Let Vivian know we were watching her moves just as closely as she was watching ours. Desperation makes people sloppy, and I needed her to make mistakes. And sure enough, mistakes came. Vivian started losing control. She called me, shaky and exhausted, asking to meet. When she showed up on my porch later that day, it was like seeing a different person. Her makeup smudged, her posture defeated, but still fighting for something. She brought a folder, trying to sound tough, but cracking under the weight of it all. She spilled about her father's Alzheimer's, the crushing cost of his care, the family empire teetering on the edge. Suddenly, the villain had a human face, scared and worn. But I didn't back down. I told her straight, resign, apologize to every family you've harassed, and spend the next 6 months learning what it means to serve this community instead of terrorizing it. And if she did that, I promised her father would get the best care no matter what happened to the project. She looked like I'd thrown her a lifeline, and maybe I did. But this wasn't mercy. It was strategy, because Vivian didn't just lose that day, she lost the neighborhood. The night of the community meeting felt electric, like you could cut the tension with a knife. What was supposed to be a small gathering turned into a full-on neighborhood uprising. Rosa did an incredible job rallying everyone. Families showed up with stories, faces lined with frustration, but burning with a newfound courage. The Johnsons were there, Harold pushing Eleanor's wheelchair, both steady and ready to speak their truth after years of silent suffering. The Patels came with their kids, holding onto each other like family armor. Marcus Williams, the teenager whose friends had been harassed for simply parking on the street, stood tall and proud, ready to call out the nonsense for what it was. One by one, voices filled the room, stories of unfair fines, of cultural decorations punished, of children's laughter labeled as noise violations. The anger was real, but so was the hope. Harold Johnson stood up at one point, his arthritic hands gripping the back of a chair, and he said something that stopped everyone cold. I fought in Vietnam so people could live free from this kind of petty tyranny. I won't let some HOA queen turn our neighborhood into a prison. The applause was thunderous, but it was Rosa who took that energy and turned it into action. She pulled out a sheet of paper and explained that according to the bylaws, they could call for a vote of no confidence to kick Vivian out. All they needed was 30% of homeowners' signatures, and just from that room, they had nearly enough. Phones came out, neighbors called each other, texted, started canvassing the neighborhood right there and then. Signatures piled up faster than anyone expected. Even Mrs. Chen, who was usually quiet on the garden committee, promised to bring in dozens more. The whole thing felt like a revolution in slow motion. And the best part? It worked. The vote passed with overwhelming support. Vivian resigned. Not quietly, not gracefully, but defeated and exposed. During the transition meeting, she actually apologized to every family she'd bullied. It was raw, painful, and honest. I could see the weight lifting from her shoulders, but also the real relief of someone who'd carried a poison for too long. But here's the kicker. Instead of settling for a simple win, Rosa unveiled a plan nobody saw coming. She proposed transforming Lakewood Estates into a housing cooperative. No more iron-fisted HOA rules. Instead, everyone owned shares in the community. Decisions made democratically. Shared gardens, community workshops, spaces where kids could play without the threat of fines. The room buzzed with excitement. Even the Lakefront residents, those who once supported Vivian, nodded along. It was bold, it was new, and it was exactly what we needed. That night, as people filed out of the community center, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Hope. Real, raw, unstoppable hope. So here I am, still fixing roofs and painting fences, but things around Lakewood Estates feel different now. Rosa's taken over as HOA president, but this time, it's not about power or control, it's about community. The cooperative model she pushed through is actually working. People are talking, laughing, sharing, instead of tiptoeing around rules like they're walking through a minefield. And Vivian? She stayed. I figured she'd bail after everything, but she didn't. Instead, she's working with us, running the community liaison program, helping new residents understand that diversity and differences aren't violations, they're strengths. It's strange, but there's something hopeful in seeing her transform from a tyrant into someone who's actually trying to make things right. I think about Margaret a lot, how those sunflowers she planted were more than just flowers. They were symbols of light in dark times. Funny thing is, that spirit still lingers here. It's like we've all planted new seeds in this neighborhood, seeds of respect, fairness, and maybe even forgiveness. This whole battle took a lot out of me. There were moments when I thought about giving up, walking away like I did before. But standing here now, seeing this community come alive in a way it never has before, it was worth every sleepless night and every fight. You know, sometimes life throws you into these crazy storms, and it's easy to get lost in the thunder and lightning. But if you hold on, if you fight for what's right, sometimes the sun breaks through in the most unexpected ways. That's the story of Lakewood Estates, and maybe, just maybe, it's a little bit my story too.